Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, so when you think Coast Guard, what comes to mind? Probably ships out on the open sea, right? But what if I told you there's a force that uses patrol boats, jeeps, and even camels? Yep, today we're diving into the really unique hybrid force that guards Pakistan's huge and challenging coastline. So right off the bat, it's super important to get this straight. Pakistan actually has two different agencies guarding its waters. You've got the Maritime Security Agency, that's part of the Navy, and they handle the big deep-sea military stuff and search and rescue. But we're focusing on the other guys, the Pakistan Coast Guards, or PCG. Their job is totally different. They're a law enforcement agency, working for the Civilian Ministry of Interior.
Okay, so if they're not the Navy, what is their mission? What do they actually do? Well, you have to go back a few decades to see why they were set up in the first place, and it was to tackle some very specific threats.
If you really want to get to the heart of what the PCG is all about, you just have to look at the law that created them, way back in 1973. The key phrase is right there, to effectively check smuggling of any kind. That one line tells you everything you need to know. From the get-go, the PCG was built to be a law enforcement body, not a naval one. Their main goal? Stop illegal stuff from crossing the coast.
And that original mission? Well, it's grown into all of this. It's not just about general smuggling anymore. Now their responsibilities include going after drug traffickers, combating human trafficking, and even patrolling rivers. They are, for all intents and purposes, the cops on the beaches and in the coastal creeks. So you've got this force with a huge, diverse law enforcement job. How on earth is it actually put together? Well, this is where things get really interesting. The PCG structure is a true one-of-a-kind hybrid. Officially, the PCG is what's called a federal paramilitary force. So, what does that actually mean in plain English? It means you have a civilian agency, funded and overseen by the Ministry of Interior, but it's led entirely by professional soldiers. And I mean entirely. Every single commissioned officer, from the brand new lieutenants all the way up to the top boss, is on loan from the Pakistan Army. So here's how that kind of wild, two-headed command structure actually works day to day. You've got the Ministry of Interior, the civilian side, handling the money and the paperwork. Then you have the Pakistan Army, which provides all the leaders and would take complete control if a war broke out. And finally, you have the PCG command on the ground, just focused on getting the mission done. It's this really unique mashup of civilian control and military discipline.
All right, so we know the who and the why, but what about the how? How does a force like this actually operate? Well, to handle such a varied mission, the PCG is broken down into some pretty specialized units, and each one is built for a different challenge.
The real backbone of the force is its battalions on land. Think of them as the boots on the ground. They're basically split into two big sectors to cover the whole coast. Sector East handles the coastline in Sindh province, and Sector West takes care of the much longer, much more rugged coast of Balochistan.
And, well, you can't be a Coast Guard without boats, right? The Marine Wing is the PCG's arm at sea. They've got these fast patrol and interceptor boats, and their job is to enforce the law in that 12 nautical mile strip of water that counts as Pakistan's territory.
Okay, now this is the part that I think is just incredible. They have a unit called the Mounted Infantry Troop, and in places where jeeps and trucks just can't go, this unit patrols on horses and camels. Yep, you heard that right, camels. It's not for show. It's a practical way for them to get to the most remote parts of the coastline, which is a pretty amazing adaptation to the geography.
So you've got soldiers on the ground, boats in the water, and even camels for the tough spots. But just how big of an area are we talking about here? It's easy to underestimate the sheer scale and the challenge of the territory they have to protect.
Get this. We're talking about a coastline that stretches for 1,050 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's the entire distance from the border with India all the way over to the border with Iran. And all of that, it's their beat. And listen, we're not talking about a simple, straight stretch of sandy beach. A quote from their own Director General really paints a picture. He talks about marshy swamps on one end and craggy mountains and rugged nullahs, which are basically deep ravines, on the other. The force has to be ready for literally anything the terrain throws at them. So when you put it all together, the Pakistan Coast Guards is clearly not your typical maritime force. It's this fascinating blend of civilian law enforcement and military leadership, custom-built to operate on both land and sea in a really tough environment. And that kind of leaves us with a big question for today's world, doesn't it? As security threats like smuggling, trafficking, and terrorism keep blurring the lines between policing and defense, you have to wonder, just how essential are these kinds of specialized, hybrid forces to keeping a nation safe?